so I'd been thinking a lot about that. And then I looked online just to have a look at the program, and then the topic was healing your body with cannabis. And I thought, ooh, okay. Well, I think I can slot that in somewhere. And then I was getting a little confused, and then I said, look in the newspaper. So I looked in the newspaper, and the topic was cannabis and cancer. So, what do we want to talk about? I think we can probably fit all three in. Ooh, oh my God, look, that's 2 out of 3. Will someone have a close call, and then we can just get on with the talk? Oh, okay, good. We've got 3. We can continue. Okay, so, well, to start, I suppose, just take a little trip down memory lane and back to where it all started. I think it was about 2014 or something like that. And I had found out that I had secondary melanoma, and we were just in the recreational scene. Strains were just sort of starting to filter into the country rather than everything just being either hydro or bush. And around that time my son realised that when he managed to get good quality cannabis, it really helped to with his mood regulation, being someone who has a tendency to bipolar. And so all of this sort of happened around the same time. And I certainly wasn't working as a doctor for many reasons, as well as having cancer. And so I thought it was something that was important enough to really get behind. And the first big thing that we had, and that was, I think it was 2014, was, and we actually called it the marijuana march, you know, for the sick and dying. It was the legalised marijuana march for the sick and dying, because it was so early in the piece that if we didn't use that word, people might not know what we were talking about. Of course, now if you say the word marijuana, you're just about lynched, because it's a prohibitionist term and should not be used. So that was sort of how it all began. And I realised that the next thing that had to happen was education. And that's how I got involved in the talks at the workshops here in Nimbin, because I felt it was really, really important for people to be educated about it all. And we've come somewhere, haven't we? You know, I think the general public certainly doesn't even care if people use cannabis really much anymore, for whatever reason. And I think that's, you know, the most important thing really. The stigma is finally starting to fade just a little, you know, especially we go, it's legal, it's medical, it's medical. And everyone's, oh, that's fine. Yeah, little do they know. Anyway, those containers come in handy, don't they? So that's where it all began. And now, who was involved? Who was involved back then in medical cannabis? Well, we had Dan Haslam, of course. He was the poster boy, and Lindsay Carter, another poster boy. Dan, of course, sadly passed away, and his mum Lucy has certainly carried the flag ever since, and she's the one that set up the symposiums and has United in Compassion and stuff like that. And there was little Sully Pike, who also passed away. In a way, I think this talk today is actually dedicated to those, to all of those who lost the battle before we won any sort of battle for them. And, you know, little Sully never did get her legal cannabis, even though it was there. But she never got it. Dan never got it. Most of them never got it. And you've got to wonder, don't you? So this talk's dedicated to those people today, because when we talk about where cannabis has come now, especially corporate cannabis, it can't be any further removed from what we were trying to do back then. And I think that you'd have to agree with that. Back then, it was all about saving lives. It was all about healing people. You know, it was all about encouraging people to look at their lifestyles and using cannabis in concert with everything else. You know, like not just on its own, You know, we've never advocated just cannabis. There's a whole world of wonderful herbs out there. And the foods that we eat. Food is medicine. And this is what we were advocating back then. You know, the epileptic children. It was all about giving them quality of life. You know, I mean, a philosophy that I've always followed in medicine is a little saying that says, we cure seldom, relieve often, and comfort always. And I really think you could not better describe cannabis and the way it works on the body, because that's what it does. It cures seldom. We know that. We've never touted that it can cure anything. It relieves often. And again, we know it doesn't always work, but it does often. But what it does do always is comfort. So I don't think we can really get a better description of what this plant is about. And, you know, do you really think that corporate cannabis has followed that? I mean, what's the experience when you go to a cannabis clinic? For a start, one clinic, I won't name any names, I'd love to, but I won't name any names. One clinic, 4 pages of consent form. This is for a plant that can't kill you. What are you going to be suing for, greening out? Like, for God's sake, 4 fucking pages. And by automated email. Though I said several times that I will scan and sign, and I did that and did all that and blah, blah, blah. No. They wanted a digital signature. And that's when I sort of drew the line and I thought, I don't want to go to this clinic. Would any of you? After that? Like, I mean, you know, it just smacks World Economic Forum, doesn't it? And I'm thinking, where the fuck is corporate cannabis gone to be asking for a 4-page consent form? So there's that. And then, of course, is how you're treated at these cannabis clinics. And, of course, I am vastly generalising, and there may be really excellent ones out there, you know, like, haven't had one yet, but we'll try. So, you know, I understand that there may be some very good cannabis clinics, and I'm not talking about individual GPs, the few and far between wonderful people that will take the time and trouble to do it, that I'm talking about the clinics. Yes, and so you get past the front desk. Well, oftentimes you don't get past the front desk. Oftentimes you don't get answered. And they'll say they'll answer you within 48 hours. Right, so this is someone that usually by the time they've got to this stage, they've been out of their cannabis for a while, you know. Nothing is ever considered, no, sorry, my sister dying, yes, I must admit they did try and get her cannabis to her then. But apart from that, there is no urgency ever. You wait your turn. So then you have the problem of getting past the front desk, which is virtually impossible. You don't really have a choice of appointments unless you make it a long way down the track. And then when you actually get in to see the cannabis doctor or speak to them as a telehealth, what do they talk about? Generally not a great deal. As a matter of fact, they might ask a few questions about your past history, and certainly no examination. I mean, they're quite happy to do the whole lot telehealth. So you're never going to be examined. And as far as I can see, there's very little liaison with the person's GP. Certainly I've never seen a discharge summary or anything like that come from a cannabis clinic to a GP. I'm sure that does happen. Again, I'm generalising. And I don't know if I've ever heard anyone talk about the other medications that they're on, whether, they're happy with those medications. There are some that will look into alternative medicine type things, various terpene supplements and or various other types of products which you buy from them, which to me colours it instantly. I don't know about you, but as soon as I have to buy their product, I'm a bit sus. And so even that to me isn't the way you do it. I mean, cannabis is a herbal medicine. When you go to a cannabis clinician, you should be having a full naturopathic assessment, which takes about an hour and a half. And you should be liaising with the person's GP, especially when it comes to medications. You know, I mean, most GPs, in fact, would be happy to sit down and have a chat about things, as long as you don't sort of badger them or say you're wrong, I'm right, and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, that doesn't even happen. I don't know if any cannabis clinician has actually ever spoken to anyone's GP, for example. So I haven't certainly not been happy with the level of medical care I've received from a cannabis clinic. I've never had hands laid on me by a cannabis clinician. And I really get the impression a lot of the time that they're just acting like a distributor. I really do. You know, I feel like I'm looking at a takeaway menu. Mind you, there's nothing wrong with that in some respects. Especially for someone who's been to Amsterdam as many times as I have. It's been quite welcome. Another experience I had is my sister-in-law, doctor up in Townsville, prescribed cannabis. And his idea of prescribing cannabis was to print out the TGA product list, which is about 4 pages long and has everything in it, most of which is useless. And that was it. And so I sort of did a few hours research and, sort of picked out the products that I thought, and basically she just went back and said, this is what I want. And that's what she got the approvals for. Mind you, he didn't even read my email, let alone respond. You get a lot of that these days, though, don't you? People not responding. Doesn't seem to be the same need anymore. I don't know why. So, everyone happy with sticking with this topic for a little while? Yeah, so, now, the other thing that I've noticed as time has gone on, and in the beginning I thought, we'll give them time. Don't give them time, just starting out. There's not even a pretense, really, at proper cannabis medicine. There's not. I mean, for a start, you only have single strains. There's no blends. I mean, and I don't know about you, but, the best medicines I've ever made are those that are blends. And it's the way that you can tweak. You can only go so far tweaking with one strain. And sometimes that strain just won't work. And yes, so you've got this limited number of strains that you can try. But as they're not blending them and as they're not doing really anything else with them, they're of limited value. I mean, really, the value is in the flower. Because that's what you smoke. And, I'm getting on to that. Now, I mean, you know how cannabis got this reputation for causing schizophrenia? Sends everybody mad and paranoid and psychotic and all that sort of stuff. Well, it wasn't actually based altogether in fallacy. There was a problem. There was a big problem with hydroponic weed. People were developing withdrawal syndromes. People were becoming paranoid. People were getting psychotic symptoms. But then when we started growing organically, we realised what the problem was. Is that when, the Dutch growers took it from the flower farming in Holland, which is very chemical heavy. And so the first weed, the skunk that was grown, was very chemical heavy. And what they did, and they found out that, people, if you really forced up that THC, then people would look for it. They'd come and want more. So it was, we're looking at the black market, cannabis, not green market, back in the day. And what they were actually doing was just making the plant devoid of CBD. Now, the cannabinoids in the CBD, in the cannabis plant, make up about 35%. of the plant. So anyone who says that they grow cannabis with a THC content of 35% are lying, because it's pretty much impossible. But what happens is that if you force up one cannabinoid it actually happens to the expense of others, because the total will still be that percent. You can't go over that percent. So if you just force the THC up and up, eventually the plant becomes devoid of any other cannabinoids, except maybe CBG. And this, of course, is what happened. And this is where, quite rightly, it got a bad name. And so, you know, we have legal cannabis coming out, and it's devoid of CBD. Like 0.01% in most of the strains. The only strains that have any more than that are the high CBD strains of, 14, 16, that sort of thing. Well, I haven't seen many one-to-ones either, actually, which is good. A one-to-one strain's a good thing. Yeah, so I thought, I cannot believe that they've made such a basic mistake, is to grow all the legal weed with no CBD. And I happened to mention this at the clinic where I went to. At that clinic, they now force you to buy CBD oil so that you make sure you have CBD with your THC. I know, is the penny starting to drop? I thought, you fucking mongrels. They've done this. They've done this to make sure that, we have to buy more of their product, instead of growing a cannabis that contains 1 to 2% CBD, which I'm going all red in the face, I can feel it, I've got to calm down. In nature, 1 to 2%, as it should be. You don't need any more than that. You can have more, and it does wonderful things if you have more, but you don't need any more than that. You only need 1 to 2% in the plant. And of course, people forget, don't they, that all of the medical things that cannabis can fix, that's come down through thousands of years. They didn't extract all the CBD and, make it up to huge big amount. But, all the healing things that happened with 1 to 2% CBD. So, I think we tend to forget that. And there's a race for how wonderful CBD is because it doesn't make you stoned and all that sort of shit. Then, basically, the main healing was always done with THC and all the other minor cannabinoids playing their part. And I am not saying there's anything wrong with, toying with nature to the point of making a high CBD strain or things like that, because CBD is a very good and safe medicine. Except, of course, if you isolate it. Because we know now that if you just give unopposed cannabinoids, you're going to cause adverse effects. There are meant to be other cannabinoids in with it. And to understand that point, have a look at aspirin. Aspirin comes from white willow bark. And aspirin, if you take it as white willow bark, it doesn't rot your stomach and it doesn't cause you to bleed. Because there are constituents within the white willow bark that stop those adverse events. So we come along, isolate the molecule, acetyl salicylic acid, there we go. And now we have a wonderful, mind you, I actually quite like aspirin, so, but to just make the point, is that, and now we have a very effective drug that causes bleeding and will rot your gut. So, and this is exactly what will happen when you isolate the cannabinoids from cannabis. You are going to get adverse events. And one thing that a lot of people don't realise too is why it won't be on the PBS. It's because you have to be able to patent it to get it to get TGA approval. And you can't patent a plant. So the only drugs that are going to get PBS approval are isolates and synthetics. So everyone needs to understand that. You will never get whole plant medicine on the PBS unless, of course, we can get rid of the TGA. which I reckon would be the best idea of all. And, of course, every chief health officer. Absolutely. I'll do the job. And I tell you what, we wouldn't have had fucking any pandemic. So, but we'll leave that topic immediately. And so this is what I'm so upset about with corporate cannabis. And that's why I wanted to take that little trip down memory lane and to dedicate it to those people that we fought for. And this is what these people have done. Where's all their compassionate programs? Where's their cheaper medicine for the people who need it? Where did all that go? In their fancy fucking packaging. I received this, I won't name the strain, I received this beautiful cardboard container, all very recyclable, a beautiful smoked glass jar, being charged $15 a week postage because they won't let you have more than 1 week at a time because, oh, fuck, what do you do with it? Jeez! So $60 a month for postage. And it weighs. So what do they know about the legislation that we don't know? Because that's a dispensary shelf product. So what are they doing making a dispensary shelf product? What do they know that we don't? Because it's certainly not an easy post product. And at the moment, the vast majority of medical cannabis is online. The vast majority. So why? Why are we getting fancy packaging? You don't need it for something that's sort of online like that. And besides, it's a medicine. We're not trying to win people over to buy this strain. That's what they do in rec. Then you can talk about that. And you've got clinics that, of course, you can only buy the strains that they want to dispense. And often have affiliates or own. There's no transparency whatsoever. Oh, sorry, there's a touch of transparency, we might say. So, this is where we're at. And I think that all these kids, all the adults, all the people that have suffered, they're owed by these people. We handed them a multi-million-dollar industry. We fought for them. We walked through the streets. We went to court. We risked our lives. We risked our businesses. We risked our careers to hand these people a multi-million-dollar industry, and they don't even take care of the sick. So, I'm really angry about corporate cannabis. And that's when I said to someone before, I've got a feeling this could be the most controversial talk at this MardiGrass. Because these people need to be pulled up, And the first corporate cannabis company that can come to me and say, we will profit from the wants and not the needs, then I might support it. And what's wrong with that? How many wellness products do you want to make your huge profits on? There's water you can make, there's infused things you can make, heaps of stuff that's even within the legislation now. All the fancy stuff that people can choose to buy. Make your profit on that because people will still buy them. But then, make the medicine cheaper. You don't spend your money on fucking packaging. You don't spend your money, you don't organise a system where you force someone else to buy another one of their product before they'll let you have the first one. That's not medicine.
Upsell and cross-sell.
So, I don't know what we can do about it, but I think that, because, that's the only option people have got, and when you can afford it, you'll do it because, really, the green market does its best, but it doesn't cover a lot. And unless you can grow your own. If you can afford the legal, you're going to get it. But I think we really have to have a serious think about how this has gone. Because it is not... we offered these people models that would work so much better than this system. And they cut out natural, naturopaths, herbal medicine altogether. when in fact it's a herbal medicine. I always thought it was pretty odd that, for example, like you required a script to prescribe foxglove as a herb. Like, you know, it's actually a scheduled herb. There's not very many of them, but there are some. Therefore, a doctor could actually prescribe you foxglove, but they know nothing about it. But they're allowed to. And so you've got this situation where but a herbalist knows exactly how to use it, but they're restricted. Like, it's crazy. And it's exactly the situation with cannabis. It's a herbal medicine.
Yeah.
And it should be treated as such. And so to expect doctors to come along and know how to deal with a herbal medicine is ridiculous. You know, it took me fucking 3 years to convert. You know, to see the differences. You know, and as I say, you know, it's a herbal medicine. You know, they should be getting a naturopathic assessment. You know, and before anything is even prescribed. How are we going for time? So we can bitch for a little bit longer about corporate cannabis. Yay! Okay, so anyone that's got any solutions, I mean, you can have compassionate programs, but they can only ever service a few. I think testing programs is another way of dealing with the section, is that, you know, you actually offer yourself for clinical trials. Because, you know, there is no necessity for safety studies or anything like that. You can have just equal one studies and observational studies and stuff. And so that's one way. But there's also ways in production, in growing, production, manufacture, everything, that you can make things cheaper. And then you have to look at your ethics. And I think this is where the corporate cannabis people have lost their way. And who are they answering to? Because it's not the people. You know, it's certainly not the sick. So, has anyone any questions about that particular section?
I was going to ask about the CBD oil. You were saying before that we shouldn't be spreading it up, but I know that you can walk into a herbal shop and just buy off the shelf a bottle of CBD oil. So I'm wondering two things: is that perhaps not a good thing, and are they making that from low THC strain, or are they somehow extracting the THC?
Very good question. And yeah, you're looking at, this opens the whole, like, you know, GMP, good manufacturing practice thing, blah, 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 blah. So you have to look at the legislation that we have, and it's very unwieldy legislation in Queensland, and I can only say Queensland, I'm sorry, you know, because it differs from state to state. And they have improved it slightly in as much as that you can get, you don't have to be prescribed the brand, you can be prescribed the percentage THC. Or the percentage of whatever it is, and there's several levels. But basically the first level's useless because it just talks about, like, the CBD isolates. And all you're going to get in the chemist or anything like that is an isolate. What you may be getting in a herbalist would hopefully be whole plant, but that is then moving up into the next level of legislation, in Queensland anyway, which would require a doctor's prescription. So that's crazy too. Like, none of it makes any sense. It's because people have written this legislation who don't know anything about it, and so you just get these crazy rules that make no sense. And also, the ignorance of cannabis medicine to think that a CBD oil is going to replace what you're smoking, what you're missing in the smoke. Like, it doesn't work like that. Yes, it will cover you as far as you're no longer having an unopposed cannabinoid. But no, it's not going to do anything for your blood levels how you want them, for not having your stone affected by the CBD, if that's the reason, you know, some people...
Can I question you on that, sweetheart?
Yeah.
I'm taking 3,000 milligrams CBD oil, and I would have to smoke 3 to 4 ounces a day of a CBD strain to get the equivalent amount.
hang on. So what's the question?
You're saying that concentrate, like you can't consume 3,000 milligrams of CBD.
Oh, no. You're missing my point.
by smoking it.
No, you're missing my point. Absolutely not. You can take as much CBD oil as you like, okay? But it's not serving to do what we want it to do in putting the CBD back in the flower that you're smoking. It doesn't do the same thing. It's got all the other effects. I'm not talking about that. I'm simply talking about blood levels and things like that. How, it is much better to have your 1 to 2% CBD with your flower. Okay, have a background CBD, blah, 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 blah. But it works better if it's there in the plant with it.
Yeah, so
Do you see my point?
So Dr. Jeff, you're basically saying when we go to the special access program, we might be getting an isolate, whereas when we're smoking, there's like an entourage more.
That is something, is that you are pretty certain you're getting the entourage effect when you're smoking flower. And people will preferentially get that because the oil can be fairly obtunding at times and it's not always practical to be on oil forever. So that's why the flower is popular, I think, too. So, yeah, definitely that gets past that. Now I can't remember the rest of your question.
Because it's an isolate, so comparing different
Okay.
oil.
It shouldn't necessarily, it depends on what level of the legislation. Like, if it's an isolate, it will be up at that top, that first level. But as soon as it's whole plant, it'll move down. So it depends. And you should know whether it is isolate or whole plant. You can certainly get both legally. But I would not recommend anything in that first level legislation because it's all isolates and synthetics.
Yeah. So when we get to about stage 3, it's a 50-50.
Then you get to 50-50 and I can't remember the figures exactly, but when you get to the top couple, then it's the 20% CBD or whatever, THC, whatever it is. And that's another fallacy. Let's just scotch this one as well, is that you have to have a huge percentage of THC, that the more THC you have, the better it will be. That's not correct, because remember what I was saying before about you've only got 35%, so if you force up the THC too much, you're starting to sacrifice the other cannabinoids in the profile. So there is really no benefit in pushing it up past 25%. You're not going, and as a matter of fact, even 25%, really. I think the ideal percentage for most things would be between 18 and 23%. There's absolutely no need. I mean, if you want to get smashed, just smoke more. Like, duh. And the feedback that apparently came back from the really high percent one, that Rocky, I wouldn't name that one because most people, which was something like 30, it was only 30% or something, was pretty universally bad reviews from it. So that's interesting too. So that's another fallacy to sort of scotch, that no, you don't need to have huge high THC levels. And in fact, like for teenagers, for example, you'd be very wise to keep all their levels under 20% until their brains develop. Actually, even 18% I'd probably say is the limit for teenagers while their brains finish developing. And okay, so the other two topics were, in the next 10 minutes or so we've got, we're healing your body with cancer and, of course, cannabis and cancer. Now, this is another interesting thing, is that why have the cannabis clinicians not pushed for using cannabis for cancer? It's been around for a while now. We can't use it for cancer, which is pretty useless. I know that a couple of them will try to prescribe as much as they can with people like palliative, but that you sort of past the point of it being used for treatment then, aren't you? I mean, the one thing that people need to realise about cancer is that there comes a point when nothing will help, and it doesn't really matter what you do. I actually have done a talk on cannabis and cancer. I think you can find it if you just search Dr. Debbie Waldron, Nimbin workshops or something like that. And only the second one's there, and I wasn't very good in the second one. I wish the first one was there, it was better. But yeah, and I have a PowerPoint for the slides for that, and that explains that. It's the concept of flashpoint, where that once the primitive cells start to multiply, there's just nothing that will stop that. And generally the person themselves will know that, whether they say it to you or not. And it's the knowing when to move from wanting to cure to wanting to comfort. And that can be a bit tricky, but it will come. It will come that we will be using cannabis for cancer. There's just so many different mechanisms of action by which it works against cancer, both CBD and THC. CBD and THC share a couple, and a couple are unique to sort of either one. And of course we haven't even researched all the other minor cannabinoids, many of which I think there's a wonderful thing that came out of Israel that Dee Dee was doing on prostate cancer, and they'd been using the same strain and or the same something or other. Anyway, it ended up that that it didn't work, and then one worked, and they found out that the only difference was in one of the minor cannabinoids. So yeah, it was a very interesting study, and there's like so many little pilot studies like that would be so fascinating to sort of follow up. But cancer is a little bit more difficult to do as an observational study, obviously, So have anyone got any questions about cannabis and cancer at this point? Okay, so very briefly, cancer sort of undergoes this circle of life, you might say. It starts out as... I'm so sorry. She just wanted me to repeat how you know, like, what flashpoint is when nothing will work against the cancer. So the cancer will go through, and it starts out as a very primitive cell, and then it will take, depending on how well it differentiates, and that's when it turns into the organ or whatever cell it's supposed to be. So if we say that a cancer is well differentiated, that means that it will resemble very closely the organ that it comes from. And as cancers become more aggressive, and as they return, people coming out of remission, the cells start to return to a more primitive state. And so that's when you'll get moderately well differentiated, and then poorly differentiated anaplastic, which means that they're just all primitive cells. And at that point, they just start to multiply, and just at an enormous rate. You look at like the doubling time of bacteria. If you start looking at doubling times, well, that's eventually what it ends up like. And so the body basically just expires through being flooded with primitive cancer cells. And there is nothing that will work, because once you have more than a certain amount of tumour burden, in other words, if you carry a lot of tumour, near the end, obviously, because it's just multiplying everywhere, then killing that cancer will kill you, because it's like a crush injury. That if you, that you can't lift the vehicle off them if they're crushed, because they'll be flooded with toxins and it'll kill their kidneys and they'll die. Exactly the same thing with dying cancer cells. If you have so many that and the treatment actually works, then your body will be flooded with dying cancer cells, and it causes acute renal failure. So that's why it's flashpoint. And that's why nothing will work. And once it reaches that point, you can't bring it back. Because even if you did, you're going to kill them anyway. Now, does that make sense? Like, does that give someone something just like... it's something to hang on to, if you're trying to judge what's happening with a cancer patient, you want to know, are they close to flashpoint? Because then you know that you change how you treat them, you change what you do. But cannabis is wonderful in all stages of treatment. Yes? Look, all I can say is that you'll know. It's just, you'll know. I can't give you a medical answer for that one. It really is very much a spiritual sort of coming of knowledge, if you know what I mean. And as I think I said before, the patient will often know. Whether they tell you or not, they will know. I don't know why, because I'm very grateful I haven't reached that point. But I think I wasn't far off. You know, I wasn't far off Flashpoint. And that's why I feel even more, you know, sort of grateful to be alive, because I really didn't have a lot of time. And, I mean, I didn't actually know how sick I was. You know, my husband will probably tell you more about that. But, yeah, so... but with the way we can use cannabis at the moment, and I do think at the very end, I think, and the way I said it to one patient I had, Sweet William, because he could never tolerate morphine really, he so much preferred the cannabis, and it reached the point he knew that he was going to die, and he, but he still didn't want to use the morphine. And I said, William, how about we look at it like this, is that cannabis is for the living and morphine is for the dying. So there's nothing wrong at reaching a point where you think, no, the cannabis can't serve them anymore. And what will serve them is good old morphine and the arms of Morpheus, so that, you know, they can leave this place calm. I think, you know, the worst deaths are always agitated deaths. I'm very lucky I haven't had too many of those, but I'm sure Teresa would know all about that as well. It's, you know, it's funny, you know, palliative care, and it's actually one of my favourite parts of medicine. Really loved it, because I didn't find it depressing. It's really sad, but I didn't find it depressing, and I just thought it was such an honour and such a privilege to accompany people on their last journey. And I think a birth with the same, you know, birth's much more pleasant. But anyway, so we move on to the last little bit, unless there's any more questions on that. That's just...
Little question, without going down too much of a rabbit hole, what's your belief on petrochemicals as a major cause of cancer in the first place?
Not just petrochemicals, mate. Let's just try. Where do you want me to start? I've got 10 minutes still. Oh, my God! I can't believe this. I'm doing really well. There's certainly petrochemicals can cause cancer.
The reason I ask that question is because petrochemicals are in so much stuff, and prevention is better than cure. So if you alleviate the petrochemicals out of your life, you've got less risk of catching cancer.
Well, you're sort of talking about saving the planet.
Exactly.
You know, and yes, we're all aware of that. I mean, you know, I brought some like veggies with me too, because I had a bit of a surplus in my garden, and you know, I couldn't even say this is organic. Like, I couldn't say that. I thought, you know, you fucking assholes, you've been dropping shit from the skies. Like, what's on my veggies that I think's organic? And anyway, but no, we'll leave that subject as well. And 5G. Moving right along well, how does cannabis do it? How does cannabis heal your body? Anybody got any ideas? How?
It's an alkaloid.
Through the cannabinoid system.
Yep.
Homeostasis.
Yes, Teresa? Homeostasis.
Cannabinoids.
Absolutely. The endocannabinoid system is a regulatory system.
The body knows how to heal when it is in homeostasis, because if you are in fight and flight survival and stress, we can't heal. But cannabis brings that homeostasis, and the body knows what to do.
And I'll try and plagiarise that. Basically what she's saying is that the endocannabinoid system is a regulatory system. It's a bit like a graphic equaliser, you know, trying to nudge everything back to the middle so it's all balanced. And the reason, you know, it's so healing is because it helps us maintain homeostasis. And we can't heal unless we're in homeostasis. Unless everything's balanced, we can't heal. And indeed, it may be part of the reason why we get sick in the first place, is because lots of things get unbalanced. But I won't go into the spiritual energy thing today. Because I reckon I've done pretty well. I'm on to the third topic and we're still going. And and I think that underpins it. I think what Teresa said underpins why cannabis heals, is because that's actually what it's there for. That's what it's there for. That's what the endocannabinoid system is for. It oversees everything. And it works by this really neat mechanism by sort of going backwards, so that it can fine-tune like nothing else. That's why it can fine-tune, because of this retrograde transmission, and the way it sort of goes back over the nerve junction and triggers a thing on the back where the cell that it came from. There's not very many processes in the body that do that. And so that's what I say underpins it. But each of the cannabinoids alone, has their own special healing sort of benefit. All right, now we'll leave the health professionals out of this one, and just ask the general audience. Okay, can someone tell me 3 ways that CBD will help heal your body?
Anxiety, depression, and inflammation.
Anxiety, depression. Well, anxiety and depression.
Don't trust me. I've been on CBD.
No. I'm just saying they're sort of much the same thing, if you know what I mean. Like in this respect, he's going to be pedantic, isn't he? Basically, it's a site. So we've got that one. We've got, what did you say? Inflammatory.
Concentration. Blood pressure.
Blood pressure. Sugar regulation. Don't see many fat stomachs, do you? But if you drink alcohol as well, that sort of cuts it out the picture. But yeah, and I think that you can. And it was actually my husband that made this observation. We were watching Woodstock, a documentary on Woodstock, and he said, "There's not one fat person there." Think about that.
There's no McDonald's either.
No, not one fat person. And you just started looking then, because my husband nitpicks things all the time, so now next half an hour thinking, there isn't one fat person. So wow, something has gone radically wrong, hasn't it? Really radically wrong. And addicting us to fat and sugar, of course, is a lot of the way to that happening, but we should all know that now. Cannabis can't heal your body if you're just eating shit food all the time. You still need, especially these days, vitamin D. You still need zinc. You still need vitamin C. You still need herbal supplements. Things that contain quercetin, for example. Lots of flavonoids. You want lots of coloured vegetables. The rainbow diet's not the worst one you can follow. And, it's interesting, because diets can be really boring. But you don't even have to be on a diet. You just have to eat whole food. Just eat whole food. And, I thought you were waving at me. Hey, why is she waving at me? No, it's 5 minutes. So even though cannabis has all these wonderful healing things, it must be done holistically. You're a whole person. You're not just an endocannabinoid system. You're I don't know if I can stress it enough, just how important it is that, if you want to heal and if you want to get through this time, then you need to look at your diet and your lifestyle, and you need to protect your immune systems. Everything should be done to give yourselves a healthy immune system from here on in. I don't care what your status is, that advice is for everybody. So, any questions on... and I suppose... we've got an anti-inflammatory. Well, CBD, of course, is, wonderful for that. And, of course, for its neuroprotective effect. Because that's what leads to its anti-convulsant effect. So it works in epilepsy. But, of course, so does THC. And, in fact, some epilepsies will be treated better with THC, some with CBD, some with acid THC, which is the inactive form. I shouldn't say inactive, I should say non-decarboxylated, that's correct, because it's not inactive. It certainly has the acid forms of all the cannabinoids, as they're found in the plant, still all have their own medical actions. And there's some people that just tout the acid forms, but hey, you know, we've got the plant. It's meant, you know, like there's a reason why you decarboxylate, you know, why not take advantage of the whole plant and what it can do? So I advocate every part of the plant doing everything. You know, from hemp seed oil to hemp, you know, I mean, you've got, it's the best oil. It's the same as your cell membranes with its ratios of 369. It's a complete protein, which is nowhere near as problematic as soy, which is another complete protein, but it has problems because of the estrogenic effects. And you know, and you move into like juicing. You know, you've got all the wonderful things you get because it's a leafy green, and as well as all the inactive cannabinoids, and they all do their bit. You know, so you eat it, you smoke it, or vape it, whichever. You know, I don't really. You could go on with the smoking vape debate forever. Obviously, it'd be slightly better to vape, unless, of course, they put something nasty in it so that they demonise the whole vaping thing, and not realise that it's what they're putting in it, not the act of vaping that's actually doing the harm. But eventually they'll get it, hopefully. And, yeah, so, you know, whatever form of ingestion. I mean, juicing is very good because you're getting that good local action on your gut. And that's why oils are good too, because you also get a local action on your gut. And I found that with when I had enteritis, is that my dog barking? Oh, barking at an, oh no, it's not my dog. She's good. Good girl, Kelly. It's the first outing to MardiGrass. So, oh, now what was I just saying? Oh, that's right. Yes. And I actually took a big dose of oil because I had to get from Gundawindi to Toowoomba, and trying to like relieve the pain. And by the time I got there, I didn't actually need any pain relief. And cannabis doesn't usually work for my pain, but it worked for my gut pain, which I thought was quite interesting. And that's what got me thinking about the local effect. And so you can actually get a local effect as well. And so, yeah, and the attack was over within a couple of days. So that was my own personal experience, just with you know, one situation where oil was better. So I'm thinking it's sort of really, because everything sort of does, it comes back to the whole regulatory thing, doesn't it? As to why it's so healing. You know, if you think of that. I don't suppose it really matters. I mean, if you've got something like reflux, then you probably wouldn't want to use a capsule because it'll bypass your esophagus. But if you've got, say, reflux and you want the oil to sort of coat the bottom of your, you know, if you want, you know, to coat especially the bottom of your esophagus, then I'd take the oil and not a capsule. You see, just have a look at what you need it for.